I told him I have this calling to go to New York and I don't know why, but it feels kind of crazy. And he said, go tomorrow. And I was like, I have all these things. And he's like, sell them. And I was like, I don't have any savings. He's like, great, better story. And so he just challenged every doubt that I had. And he was an entrepreneur himself and had taken risks himself and was just kind of like, listen, no matter what, you'll have a better story to tell. And that was an interesting thing that I hadn't really considered at that point of like, oh yeah, my life is a story that I get to write. Why don't I write the most interesting one?
Amber Rae, welcome to From Vision to Creation. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this with me today.
Of course, I'm happy to be here.
You are the international bestseller of Choose Wonder Over Worry, which has been translated into 8 different languages, which is incredible.
Thank you.
In addition to The Answers Are Within You, The Feelings Journal, and now Loveable, which is coming out in August of 2025, which I, like I mentioned to you, read from cover to cover in one sitting. It was so amazing.
I love hearing that. Thank you.
But I want to take things back a little bit because I know that you started your professional journey working in marketing at Apple and then joining Omnicom's first digital agency. What was the moment in your career that you decided that you wanted to shift from the marketing tech world and pursue your own creative journey?
So I moved out to San Francisco, Silicon Valley. So I was more in the, Apple brand marketing side of things in Chicago, which is where I grew up. And I then made this leap to Silicon Valley, which I was so excited about because I grew up, my next door neighbor was my babysitter, but her dad built and sold computers. And so I was 5 years old building computers with him and just a very, a kid that loved computers and technology. I was starting online magazines when I was 11 and just like very interested in the early days of the internet. And so of course the heart of that is Silicon Valley. And so I made a leap from Chicago to San Francisco and found myself truly heartbroken by like what I thought Silicon Valley would be and what it actually was. Just, I kind of came with a lot of, the vision and the beauty of what technology could be, and just found that there was a clash between my value system and a lot of value systems of the companies, whether it was just, fully profit driven or, just a different value and intention set. And so I guess it was that heartbreak that led me to reevaluate, what am I really doing here? And it was around that time that I was feeling this kind of inner tug of, you're supposed to go to New York. And this voice inside me just kept saying, go to New York, go to New York. And I had never been to New York, but I decided to kind of like listen to this call. And so in a 48-hour period, after 9 months of contemplation, I quit my job, I sold my belongings, and I moved from San Francisco to New York in 48 hours. And wrote a piece about it on Tumblr, which was, Instagram didn't exist yet. It was, kind of the platform back then, about my experience. And that piece ended up going viral, to my surprise. I finished in the airport at, because there wasn't Wi-Fi on planes yet. They finished it in the airplane or at the airport at SFO, published it. And when I landed in New York, I was surprised that so many people were resonating with this idea of kind of following your passion, if you will, which feels like everyone talks about now, but was kind of a newer thing back then. So, I think it was my dissatisfaction and the disconnect between what I thought it would be and what the reality of it was, combined with just this like inner calling that was begging for my attention.
That's so interesting. So you just heard a voice in your head that said, move to New York.
Yeah.
You didn't have really a plan of what you're going to do when you got here, sold all your belongings, got on the plane and moved.
Yep.
Wow. And so was there a particular moment though where you were like, because I'm sure you had this thought and I'm sure you went back and forth a little bit, like, should I do it? Should I not do it? What was the moment that you thought, you know what, I'm going to do this. Like, I cannot do this any longer. I need to make this change.
I sat down with someone named Amit Gupta, and he was the founder of Photo Jojo, which was this kind of celebrated photography tech website back then. And I told him I have this calling to go to New York, and I don't know why, but it feels kind of crazy. And he said, go tomorrow. And I was like, I have all these things. And he's like, sell them. And I was like, I don't have any savings. It's like, great, better story. And so he just challenged every doubt that I had. And he was an entrepreneur himself and had taken risks himself and was just kind of like, listen, no matter what, you'll have a better story to tell. And that was an interesting thing that I hadn't really considered at that point of like, oh yeah, my life is a story that I get to write. Why don't I write the most interesting one?
Oh, I like that.
And so that kind of, I was like, all right, this actually feels really exciting and liberating. What's the worst that could happen? I get to New York and there's no opportunity and I get another corporate job. I don't know, you know?
And so you write this Tumblr post at the airport on your way to New York. You land and you realize that it's gone kind of viral just on the flight over.
Just on the flight over, yeah.
Did you think, okay, this is a sign that I'm on the right path?
I did. And what was interesting is that like a entrepreneur and the investor people shared it to different groups. And so like Guilt Group was trying to hire me. These different like corporations were trying to hire me, which my whole post was about kind of leaving the corporate world. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, I definitely saw it as a sign of, okay, my writing is striking a chord. And, I'd always been a writer, but never really thought writing was the thing. Writing was just always the thing I did for myself. And so I think the aha moment there for me was, oh, I can actually write about my experiences and that's a mirror for other people. And that's actually helpful to other people, which is something that I hadn't considered would ever be the case.
And I want to talk about what led to your writing, Choose Wonder Over Worry. But I want to hear a little bit more about your journey and what you did when you got here before you decided to write the book.
Yeah. So the Amit who, was the inspiration or the kind of the catalyst for me to finally move to New York. I told him, okay, I moved to New York 48 hours later. And he was like, what?
That was a little faster than he thought, maybe.
Yeah, but he happened, and this is, wasn't part of the plan, but he happened to be a very well-connected entrepreneur. And he said, great, I'm going to introduce you to the team at Squarespace, the team at Tumblr, the team at Foursquare. This was like early days of tech. Foursquare was, had just gotten funding, blah, blah, blah. And so he introduced me to all these founders and I started kind of creating opportunities for myself. So it was the very person who was the catalyst who ended up being the connector for me in New York as well. Because I think he saw, okay, this girl's willing to take risks and like make things happen. I wonder what she can make happen for these companies.
And what were those opportunities that you were creating for yourself?
Well, I pitched him on, why don't I figure out collaboration opportunities between your company and these different brands? So it benefited him as well. I kind of made up a role for myself and he was like, great, go figure it out. And I remember I went to Squarespace and I sold like a $50,000 ad deal in a 5-minute conversation and got a cut of that. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like that was the easiest money I've ever made. And so it was really this, not that I wanted to be necessarily in ad sales, but it was this like kind of playground moment for me of, I'm going to try it all. I'm going to try things on, see how they feel, figure out what fits. Because, at this point I was in my early 20s. I didn't really know who I was or what I wanted to do. I knew that what I was doing wasn't what I wanted to do. And so it was kind of a time of figuring out what was a no and what was a yes. And the only way I knew how to do that was to try it on.
That's a really common theme that we talk about in this podcast is that oftentimes you need to figure out what it is that you don't want to do before you figure out what it is that you do want to do.
Totally.
And so I know that writing a book, there's a lot that goes into it. There are many steps that happen before the actual writing takes place. When was the first time you had the idea for the book before you even really realized what exactly it was going to be?
Yeah, so in that whole time of experimenting in New York, Seth Godin, he's like a 14 times New York Times bestseller, kind of created internet marketing in a way. He put out a call for apprentices because he was launching a publishing company with Amazon. And so he wanted to hire a small group of people to help him bring that project to life. So I applied and ended up being chosen to be his chief evangelist. So my job was, how do I help spread these ideas? And working with him and having this kind of front row seat at experimental publishing, we brought 12 books to market in 6 months, and we were kind of doing things very differently than the traditional publishing world. And it was through that process that Seth, he would give us these daily lessons and kind of encouraged us to figure out what is it, the work we really want to be doing in the world. And it was through working with him that I started thinking about, okay, what's my message? If I had to distill my life journey, the very personal journey that I've been on into a universal message, what is that universal message? What can my story be how can my story be a rallying cry for others? And that's where I realized like all of these risks and leaps I was taking was really this idea of choosing wonder over worry. Because, there were all these moments where I could have let worry, fear, or doubt dictate. I could have stayed in San Francisco because what if it didn't work out? What would people think? What if I upset my boss? What if I let my colleagues down? But instead, I chose wonder, which was I'm going to lean into the risk of what could be and the possibility of where this might lead and how it's actually more true and aligned for me. And so, and then it was around that time that Kate Spade reached out to me to do their end of year keynote for 5,000 people. It was my first talk, 5,000 people. Insane. I thought I was going to fall over and vomit. But I then took the idea. I was like, okay, I like that idea. Seth liked that idea. And I distilled it into, a 20-minute keynote. And so it was like, first I got the idea and then I wanted to rapid test it. I think my process has always been like rapid experimentation. In the tech world, we would call it like, what's your MVP, your minimal viable product? So it's like, what's the smallest version of your idea that you can start to bring to people to see how does it resonate? How does it stick? What's the feedback loop? What are people really getting pulled toward? It's like Reels today on Instagram are a way to like test messaging and content and see what sticks. Because you don't know, like in our own head, we might think, oh, this is the most interesting part of our story or the most interesting part of an idea. But when other people reflect back to you, this is what really stood out to me. This is, So anyway, that keynote talk became the place for me to get that feedback loop, which then eventually led to me thinking, okay, this really was sticky for people. So now how do I turn this into a book?
And so, okay, wow, that's really cool. So this one speech, you're like, all right, people are really resonating with this. And it was like almost like, did you know that you would potentially want to turn that into a book one day? Or was it just did that not occur to you until after the speech?
Working with Seth, I knew I wanted to write books. I didn't know I wanted to write books until I was with him helping people publish their books. And he kind of was like, I think you have book writing in you. So he also like saw it and reflected it back to me and I agreed. But yeah, it was also like, I remember the chief people officer of Kate Spade coming up to me after and being like, my story is your story. And being like, okay, well, wow, this executive at this company, because I was still like nervous and afraid. And like, even though I was talking about choosing wonder over worry, I was so filled with worry on that stage of like, it was so new for me. I'd never spoken in front of that many people. I didn't know if the idea would land. And so it was really affirming to hear, okay, this is something that's actually helpful to people.
And so once you realized that this is something that was helpful to people and that it was resonating, and then you had the idea, okay, I'm going to start writing this book. I'm sure you had an idea of what writing a book would be like. And I'm sure the reality of it totally kind of shattered that illusion that you had. What do you think is the biggest thing that you learned about the writing process in general, and also about yourself after having immersed yourself in that process?
I think we write the book we need to read. And so I think every message this has been my experience, every message that I've written in a book has been an initiation for me. So for example, with Choose Wonder Over Worry, when I got the book deal, my publisher asked if I could write the book in 3 months. And worry was like, absolutely not. That's crazy. How would I ever write a book in 3 months? And wonder was like, why not? You're being initiated into this idea. You got to choose wonder. So I was choosing wonder. And then of course, in the process of having that time constraint, there was a lot of what if the writing isn't good enough? And I just had a lot of insecurities about being a first-time author come up around, the quality of the writing and who am I to write this book and all those different imposter syndrome, anxiety around the deadline. And so I saw that as an opportunity to live the message and to actually get curious about the worry that was arising for me. And then it led me actually down this path of research. And I ended up meeting with Dr. James Doty, who's a neurosurgeon at Stanford. He created I think it's called the Center for Compassion at Stanford. And he told me that the average adult spends 80% of their time with regret about the past or anxiety about the future. So the average adult spends 80% of their time worrying. And so I guess my own anxiety and worry in the book writing process led me down a path of more research and actually understanding how universal my message was. Where it's like, when you're alone in a writing room, you kind of think you're the only one that's struggling with whatever I was struggling with. And I found that actually what I was struggling with was very common. And so I think it helped me just get perspective and also figure out, because writing is always, and I've always had kind of a memoir voice where I want to use personal storytelling, not just like how to detached from, from the writing, figure out how to tell my story in a universal way. So I think it helped me like also understand that worry isn't bad and worry is actually useful and worry is trying to protect us and worry can help us. And so I think it made my struggles made the work stronger.
And you mentioned something in your new book, Loveable, where you're talking about how a lot of the worry that we experience isn't actually us. It's our younger selves trying to protect us. Yeah. And I think that the way you described that was perfect, because once you can identify that, there is something very empowering in that knowledge, because you think, okay, it's literally just my previous conditioning. The fear isn't necessarily real.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, oh, my perfectionist that's 12 years old is worried that it's not good enough. Okay, I can now have compassion for that part of me that really wants it to be good. And actually, I can talk to that part of me and be like, hey, perfectionist, I understand that your intentions here are good, but like we got to get messy and write bad drafts before we can write really good drafts. And then the perfectionist would calm down, And so it became like almost a self-healing process. I didn't expect that I would heal myself through the writing and heal those younger parts.
And Amber, that's actually gold, because I think that the reason that a lot of people don't start their creative projects, especially one like writing a book, is that you think it has to be perfect the first time around. You feel like when you're typing the words, you're actually carving them into stone. And it's like, no, write the messy first draft and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, when I teach writing workshops, I time people and I say, okay, we have 5 minutes, write a bad draft. And it's like, your only goal here is to make it bad as possible. And that like is really, okay, I can, it's liberating for people. And then the second draft, I do set another timer for 5 minutes. I say, okay, now make it brave. Go in where can you be more honest? Where are you not saying what you really mean? And then people go on and they realize, okay, actually, this is what this piece is really about. Because when I'm figuring out what the honest thing is, often the thing that we need to hear.
Right.
And so it's such a liberating process to break free of the perfectionism, because it's just a trap for all of us.
And I want to circle back to your first book deal. You mentioned that you landed this book deal. How did you go about getting a book deal?
I knew I would need a proposal. So once I had traction around the message and some traction in my personal platform, I put it in I think it was like a 10-page kind of mini proposal, which was a big picture sense of the idea, about why I should write it, and why now was the time for the idea to be in the world. So and my agent, Sarah, always says, what's the why now, why you, why this? And so I, without knowing it, kind of had put that together in a document. And then I went to, Seth introduced me to his literary agent. I was like asking people in my network, but I went to a random dinner and happened to sit next to an author, told her about my book, and she's like, you have to meet my agent. And this stranger ended up being the person who introduced me to Sarah, who's now my agent.
Whoa.
So, and it makes me think of The Artist's Way is a book that I love. And I remember her saying that, or Joseph Campbell actually said it, but there's the idea of 1,000 helping hands. And when you're in the path of what's right and true for you, and you put in the work and you're acting on that thing, all of these, synchronicities will show up in unexpected ways. And I really have found that to be true for my experience. The people I know really well aren't necessarily the people that are going to be the connector. It can be Amit, who I was meeting by the way, that was my first time meeting him, when he said, go tomorrow. He was a stranger to me. And then this other stranger is the person who ends up connecting me with the literary agent, who would then go on to change my life.
I absolutely love that, Amber, and I cannot agree with you more, because I agree that when you are being brave and taking the leap and pursuing the things that you are most passionate about, writing your best story, which I love, what you said at the beginning of this interview, your most interesting story. I also agree that these synchronicities start to happen, and almost like so much so that you're like, okay, there's no way. Like, actually, I have one for you.
Tell me.
Pertaining to this interview.
Oh.
The book that I read right before your book, and I've read this book several times throughout my life, but I wanted to read it again because I always take something new from it, was The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, who you worked with, and I figured that out after the fact.
He's wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Wow. I mean, what a book, seriously.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I think the synchronicities are definitely kind of like little signs the universe is giving you and just reaffirming you like you're on the right path.
Totally. And I found that like, so long as I know the what, like my next what is Oprah, like how am I going to get to Oprah?
Mm-hmm.
But like maybe a stranger is going to get me to Oprah. I don't know, but like focus on the what and like let go of the how.
Mm-hmm.
I have found. So
I want to talk about your new book because you touch on several very important topics throughout the book. And I even found myself relating to your story a lot and being like, oh, wow, you know, this kind of has happened to me too, especially about creating boundaries especially when it comes to family, because families can be the toughest.
Yeah.
But the first thing that I want to ask you about is you talk about how you were in a relationship for a long time. I believe it was 10 years total.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of felt that there was something off or not quite right, but you kept on trying to convince yourself that if I put in more time, if we go on this vacation, we start this venture, it's going to get better. And then you would try these things and, you know, you kind of started seeing that nothing was really happening there. And so you end up deciding to leave a marriage of somebody that you were together with for almost 10 years.
Yeah.
Because, okay, I know that there's a lot of fear around something like this, but I want to talk to you about the moment that you thought, okay, you know what? This is not working. I need to make a change here.
Yeah, I think just to give, a little bit of context is that, and this is an experience I keep hearing from people, is that we have so much hope and we have so much optimism. And, when my ex-husband was my best friend. Mm-hmm. And so that was very confusing because I cared about him. We had a good time together. I liked his work. There was a lot about the relationship that was working. There was a lot that wasn't working too, but I was so hopeful. Oh yeah, we'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do this, or we'll figure out the intimacy piece eventually. Even though that chemistry isn't quite there, I feel safe with him. Maybe that's okay. We become very convincing with ourselves and we can bargain a lot when we want something to work. And the more I talk about this, the more I'm realizing how many people are finding themselves in a very similar situation. But I think the moment for me was after 9 years of trying therapy, workshops. Okay, I'll make him my business partner because maybe if he's my business partner, I'll finally get the closeness that I'm after. We had been together for 9 years, but we were only married for 2. But it was our 2-year wedding anniversary. And, we talked business the entire time. And there were these moments where there could have been a romantic moment. I remember people coming to play music at the table, and I was like, "Oh, this is the romantic moment." And he was like thinking about business. And then we go back to our room at the end of the night, and we pop champagne, and there's rose petals everywhere. And then he turns on The Voice and falls asleep. And so I'm sitting there drinking champagne alone. Okay, has this really what the relationship has become? And I think going into business with him. And he loved work so much. And that being a place that I still couldn't find connection, that emotional intimacy and connection was kind of a moment of okay, I feel like I've exhausted every possibility. And I've probably overexhausted. My friend, Vienna Farron, she's a couples therapist. She says sometimes the growth is in the staying and sometimes the growth is in the leaving. And, I tend to, in reflection, I now know I tend to be an overstayer. And overstayers are people who are fixers, pleasers. I'm going to try really hard, self-improvement. I can put in more time and energy. And so, the overstayers are the ones who will clearly stay too long. So I think it was just that moment of I've tried everything and it's not working. Maybe I can't make this work.
Yeah.
And then it was literally the next day when I had that kind of moment of self-revelation that I met John, this person who I had this kind of instant soulmate. Oh, connection is supposed to feel like this moment with, which is something, I was 35 years old, something I'd never experienced before in my life. And so it was the combination of I think my own inner awakening, then life presenting me with yeah, this is actually what romantic connection is supposed to feel like, which I know is maybe not the way, I don't know, things are supposed to go or has been taboo to some people. But I think life, synchronicities, and life presents things in unexpected ways.
And I like that you talk about being somebody who tends to overstay, because I think it's important, because I think a lot of people beat themselves up about that. Like, oh my God, I wasted all this time in this relationship. But really, I don't think it's necessarily time wasted in every case, because maybe you needed that time to figure it out, that, hey, this isn't for me. But the empowering thing about listening to your story is that people may not even conceive of that maybe they're in the wrong relationship. Just because you get married doesn't mean that that's your person forever.
Yeah.
My parents got married, and I'm so glad they weren't together forever.
Totally.
They were not each other's person.
And so many people say, well, I'm staying for the kids. And I'm like, the kids don't want you to stay. Like, the
Please
kids
don't
want you to, like, hate each other and resent each other and not actually, like, they want you to, like, love your life and find true love. And I think, there's this idea in society that we have to stay no matter what. And I think we need to be honest no matter what. And I think we need to, sometimes a marriage doesn't work and you actually kind of remarry the same person and figure out a way to make it work. And sometimes growth means growing apart. And I think the more we can celebrate whatever is right and true for every couple, the better off our society will be. I just want love for all, true love for all.
Absolutely. And you also mentioned that we have a lot of hope around relationships. I can say with 100% certainty right now that I'm with my soulmate, the love of my life. We're going to spend the rest of our lives together. He's the best person on earth. But before, I had to kiss a few frogs before.
Totally.
But the relationships in my life prior to this one that weren't working, I was still so hopeful. You know what? Maybe one day he'll be a different person, and so will I, and so we can get along, and it's going to be great. I think that the lesson in your story too is that being brave enough to end a relationship, even when it feels comfortable, is so important, because sometimes, and oftentimes usually does, lead you to your true soulmate.
Totally. And leave before you hate and resent each other. There's a moment where it's like, ooh, this really isn't working, and we've tried and we've given it our all. And, when I liberate myself from this, I'm liberating the other person too. And so remembering that liberation is a two-way street.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that too. You wrote that so perfectly in the book. I actually paused with that one, and I thought, it's true, because you think, I don't want to be this selfish person and end this relationship and upset this person. But to your point, what favor are you doing them in staying?
Yeah.
I mean, if it's not working, because then you're kind of blocking them from finding their true love too.
Totally. Who wants to be with someone who's not all in?
Exactly.
I was so terrified of hurting him, but I was like, wait, I'm hurting him by staying in something where my heart isn't fully in this. And so he deserves someone who can see, meet, love, respect, meet him in all the ways he wants to be met. We both do. So let's free ourselves so we can find that.
And you write about a time in your life where you were pursuing men who were unavailable, and you probably knew that, or a little part of you did at the time. I also did the same thing. I was like, he's unavailable. He's perfect. I'm going to change
him. He's charming.
Yeah, he's like,
it's so magnetic.
Interesting. Yeah. When you wrote about that, I was like, that is so perfect. Yeah. Whoa, this is so mysterious how he doesn't text me back. Yeah, it's like, no, love should be easy. When you start having to fill in the blanks, that's when you know it's an issue.
Totally.
But Amber, so another thing that you talk about, or that you write about, that I think is really amazing, is creating healthy boundaries with family members. Because I think that family can be especially overbearing in many ways, because they almost feel like you're your family, so they could just treat you however they want to. Talk to us a little bit about your experience with that and how you created healthy boundaries in your relationships.
Yeah, I think the realization for me around boundaries was that boundaries, and this is what I had to even communicate to the people that I was setting boundaries with, boundaries don't mean stay away from me. Boundaries are not a distancing tool. They're not a rejection. They're not I don't want you in my life. Boundaries are, I want you in my life and I want connection, but in a way that feels safe for me, and a way that, I can still honor myself in this relationship. And when, you are sharing 19 opinions about things where I haven't asked your opinion, or, calling me under the influence or, whatever the combination of things was, that started to feel unsafe for me. And so, yeah, boundaries are a huge part of my journey and really a learning to respect the little girl who never felt like she could stand up and say, this isn't okay. And now adult me gets to say, this isn't okay, this isn't working. I get to say, I have a say in how this relationship works. And I think with family members, particularly, parents or older siblings who are used to having kind of the upper hand, it's a bit of a surprise when you want to change your role in the relationship and you want to show up differently. Because when you've always played the same role, that's comfortable for them. That's, they know what to expect. And so that change can be confronting and scary. And then I think the other thing for me around boundaries that I also had to learn was the difference between requests and boundaries. Because for a long time, I would say, lower your voice or stop calling me 6 times, a day, or please don't make comments about my body or whatever it was. Those were requests. Those weren't boundaries. A boundary is exiting the room if a voice is raised versus asking the person to lower their voice or, hanging up the phone if a voice is raised instead of trying to get the other person to change. And so it really the boundaries for me was, okay, what can I do that is completely 100% in my control in this scenario to take care of myself? What is the healthy move for me here?
And I love that you make that distinction because as long as you're hoping that someone else is going to change, you're totally powerless. But if you change how you respond and react to situations, you quite literally hold all of the power.
Totally. And it's like, you're not meeting my needs. And then I'm then staying in this dance versus, okay, wait, I get to choose how I respond. I get to choose how I react here now.
And Amber, I think it was really brave of you to write this book, Loveable, because you're so vulnerable and you're so honest, and it really does shine through to the reader. I felt so empowered after having read your book because, again, it validated a lot of things that I was feeling, and it gave me different ways to look at certain things in my life. But another thing that you talk about a lot is about freeing yourself from worrying about the opinions of others, especially when it pertains to pursuing your passions. Can you kind of talk to us about what that was like for you, especially at the beginning of your journey when maybe you didn't have as much confidence as you do now, just purely because you were just getting started and didn't have the successes that are under your belt now?
Yeah, I mean, with my career, it was people thought I was nuts because I quit my job, this promising job. I was climbing the ladder, blah, blah, blah. Quit that job and moved to New York in 40. People thought I was nuts, which was not different from leaving my marriage because I met my soulmate and doing it in 6 weeks. People also thought I was nuts. And I think, people are always going to have a lot of big feelings around things, particularly when those things challenge their own sense of self. And so when I made my big career move, that was still a time when people thought they needed to stay at the same job for 40 years. And so, oh, wait, she just thinks this millennial thinks she can just quit and go and follow her passion. And now it's people, I think a lot is changing around relationships, but people either, witnessed a parent leave in a really betraying way, or people, maybe are stuck in their own dynamic because they think because they're an overstayer. My story challenges their own reality, and that's very confronting. And so all of that to say, I think is what's helped me the most is actually to have compassion for the people who shame, hate, or have, feelings about what I'm choosing to do, because that is coming from their own pain. It has nothing to do with me. I'm just a mirror that is really hard for them to look into. I don't know the reason. I don't need to know the reason, but I know it's not about me. And I know that, they are struggling with something. And so I can hold compassion and love for them in their path.
And that's actually really interesting because I found, and by the way, just for more context, I'm the type of person, I've taken a lot of risks in my life. I'm unapologetically me as often as I can.
Yeah.
And so I'm not a stranger to pursuing my passion. But even then, in your book, there were several things that you wrote that even though they were the most liberating pieces of advice, they were also the scariest. And so I started thinking, what is that? Why is it that we get so scared about being free?
I think freedom is unknown, and unknown is scary. And the fear part of our brain wants things to be certain and comfortable and known. And so anytime we do something meaningful, novel, interesting, anytime we take a risk, it threatens that. It's a biological part of us. It threatens that part of us. And so fear will do whatever it takes to try and bring us back to safety and comfort. And so, freedom requires restraint. We don't become free unless we're restrained. And so that restraint can be a comfort zone. So breaking free of that, you have to break free, requires some sort of leap into an unknown that comes with a lot of discomfort.
I've never thought of it that way, but I agree. And Amber, after having written Loveable, how is it that you hope the readers internalize this story?
It's funny. Rick Rubin, I watched a interview with him recently, and he said, consider the audience last. And I loved that because he said art isn't commerce. When you consider the audience first and you make something just for the audience, that's commerce. It's not art. And I really approached writing the book in that way. Like, I wrote the book that I needed really to write for my own healing and process. And it was the story that I needed to tell. And I wasn't really thinking about how the audience was going to receive it when I was writing it. I couldn't think about what John was going to think when I wrote it, because I would have written a different book. Oh God, he's going to be embarrassed by this scene. I just had to write what I needed to write. So I hope the reader takes away whatever is going to free or liberate them, and I think what's unique about memoir is I'm not saying choose wonder over worry. I'm not saying here's your takeaway, let me hand it to you. I'm saying here's a story that I hope somewhere in here you find yourself in. And in finding yourself, you realize you're not alone, and that you have the power to choose courage over fear. So I want people to take, and I'm curious because you said you read the book in one sitting and it resonated with you. Like, what was the takeaway for you?
One of the major takeaways for me was that you need to be able to create boundaries that create an environment for you to be prosperous and feel like you're living your best life.
Yeah. Because
I feel that I'm also very much a people pleaser. I want everyone to feel good, and sometimes at my own expense. And I think what I'm trying to work on is not being so willing to make myself uncomfortable so that somebody else can feel better.
Beautiful. I love that. Yeah. Disappointing others can be a skill. You see, I would have never been like, oh yeah, this book is about boundaries. So I love that that's like what was meaningful for you.
Yes.
Which is the beauty of memoir.
Well, and also Amber, just getting to read your story, it's just inspiring, and it makes you realize it doesn't really matter what people say or think or how they feel about you. As long as you're a good person and you're pursuing what makes you happiest, who cares about the rest?
Totally.
Another big takeaway for sure.
Beautiful. I love that you're giving the takeaways.
And Amber, you've helped thousands of writers in their own creative journeys, and about a dozen of them have landed a 6-figure book deal. What led to your wanting to coach people and guide them down that path?
Yeah, my whole career path has been completely unexpected and unplanned. I create something that moves me, and then the world responds, and that kind of opens these doors I wouldn't have imagined. Coaching writers is another thing that I released a book, and then people started coming to me and saying, hey, can you help me write my book? Or, hey, can you help me tap into my bravest story? Your story was really brave. And I was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. I never thought about that. So it really emerged from, I guess, like desire and demand. And then realizing that I love supporting writers to tap into those truest, bravest, most honest stories, and then figure out how to get them into the world. It's like fun for me.
And what patterns do you see holding writers back?
Definitely the perfectionist. This writing isn't good enough. And so, we already talked about that, of writing the bad drafts. This has already been said. So many people have written a book about this topic. What do I uniquely have to say on this? I don't have anything interesting to say, which is, yeah, maybe it's been said, but it hasn't been said by you and hasn't been said through your experience. And yes, there is a process of like, what is the hook here and what is your unique point of view, which is a process I can take people through to get clear on. But those are two. I'd say another one is, what are people going to think if I write about my ex-stepdad or my ex-husband or my mother and they read it? Oh gosh, like that feels terrifying. I can't possibly put it on the page. To which I always tell people, write first, edit later. Because the point of writing isn't to publish it necessarily. The point of writing is that it's a healing and cathartic process for you. And sometimes you write it and that's all that you needed. And you don't actually have to publish it because the juice and the magic and the gold came through that writing process. Sometimes you say, ooh, this is actually, there's something here and something universal, I think. Let me find a way to edit this down in a way that feels good for me. Or maybe I get the permission of the person involved. And so it's just people bring the editor into the room too early. And I have people separate out, there's the writing process, the editing process, and then the promotional process, very different stages. If you bring the editor into the writer gets very scared and can't actually write anything of depth and beauty. And if the writer is too involved in the editing process, the editor can't get anything done because the writer is overly sensitive and wants everything to stay. And the editor's like, but we have to consider who it's for. And then if the writer is trying to be the promoter, then again, it's like very sensitive. And if you get harsh feedback, the writer's crushed. And so it's like I teach people how to wear these different hats in their creative process because they're all important. But it's really important that you know what stage of the creative process that you're bringing each one into.
And what advice would you give to somebody who feels called to share their story, but are held back due to fear of what others may think?
I'd say, write for you first. Put the sharing to the side for now. And like, what other people will think is in your editing room or in your writing room, you're never going to write that first bad draft and that first brave draft. So I would say timer 5 minutes, write the bad draft. Timer 5 minutes, write the brave draft. And then like evaluate what you want to do with it. You have to just get the writing down first. You can't think about anyone except for yourself and what it is that you have to say.
And Amber, what is the biggest lesson you've learned throughout the course of your career so far?
Follow curiosity and wonder, I think, has been follow the thing that moves me and is alive in me and kind of let go of where it needs to go, what it's supposed to become, and just kind of let life unfold and witness has been, because again, I would have never 10 years ago, 15 years ago, been like, I'm going to be the author of 4 books and I'm going to write this book about leaving my marriage. Like, I mean, what? And so it's really kind of trusting life and then following curiosity.
And Amber, is there a question that you've never been asked that you would like to be asked that can shed more light on the lessons you've learned and your journey?
It's a good question. I don't know. I can't think of a question. Is there a question that you've never been asked that you'd like to be asked?
I've never thought about it. This is also the first time somebody asked me a question.
It's a great question. It's a great question. But I'm like,
I have one, actually. Sure. I think something that I've never been asked that I would have liked to have been asked is, especially before I really started going for what I wanted to do, what's taking so long? What's really holding you back? Because that was never really addressed. It was just kind of like I had my own fears, but I never really thought about why I wasn't getting started doing what I wanted to do.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah.
And Amber, what is the best way for people to keep up with your work? And if they want to work with you, if they need a writing coach, anything like that, what's the best way to find you?
My Instagram is Hey Amber Rae. AmberRae.com will have all of my offerings. You can join my newsletter and then, of course, get Loveable anywhere books are sold. I'm not teaching any writing workshops at the moment, but that might change because I'm getting a lot of requests around it. Yeah.
And Amber, if you could go back in time and offer your younger self one bit of advice right before embarking on this journey, specifically tailored to you, what would it be?
Don't just listen to your knowing, act on it, and really trust those whispers. And I say that knowing that I actually wouldn't go back and have left my marriage any sooner, because I think there was a lot of learning that needed to happen there. But I didn't really listen to the nudges. I shut them down. And so I would remind people that the voice within them is wanting to be heard if we can give the space to let it be heard.
Well, Amber, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. This was amazing. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so fun. Thank you.